The mining colony on Kepler 442b had always been quiet, which is exactly why Danny Rodriguez liked working there as security chief. The red dwarf star cast a dim light over the rocky world, and the 300 colonists who worked the mineral extraction operations rarely caused trouble. That changed the day people started disappearing. It began with Marcus Webb, a maintenance worker who failed to show up for his shift. His quarters were searched and found empty, with no signs of struggle or forced entry. His personal belongings were still there, including his identification card and credit chips. Security cameras showed him entering his room after dinner, but never leaving. 3 days later, engineer Sarah Kim vanished from the central power plant. She had been working alone on a routine repair when she simply ceased to exist. The security system showed her walking into the power room, but the next scan revealed an empty chamber with her tools scattered on the floor. Danny increased patrols and implemented a buddy system, but the disappearances continued. Dr. Beth Adams from the medical center, Supervisor Carl Johnson from the mining operations, and communications officer Janet Ross all vanished within a week. The colonists were becoming terrified, and Danny was running out of answers. Amy Parker had been appointed colony administrator just 6 months earlier, and she prided herself on maintaining order and protecting the people under her care. She was reviewing security reports in her office when her assistant knocked on the door. "Ma'am, we have another situation. The children in the education center are scared. Some of their parents have been among those who disappeared, and they're asking questions we can't answer." Amy stood up from her desk and walked to the window that looked out over the colony's main plaza. Children were playing in the central courtyard under the watchful eyes of their teachers, but she could see the tension in the adults supervising them. Everyone was afraid. "Schedule an emergency evacuation drill for tomorrow morning," Amy decided. "If something dangerous is in the colony, I want to make sure we can get everyone to safety quickly if needed." What Amy didn't know was that she was being watched. Silthmer had arrived on Kepler 442b 2 weeks earlier, and he had been studying the human colony with professional interest. The Vorthic assassin found their security measures primitive but adequate for defending against conventional threats. What impressed him was their social structure. Unlike most species the Vorthok had hunted, humans seemed to have strong protective instincts that extended beyond family units. He observed workers risking personal injury to help colleagues in dangerous situations. He watched as colonists shared resources with families who had lost breadwinners to the mysterious disappearances. Most interesting was their leader, Amy Parker, who spent her time ensuring the safety of others rather than securing her own position. Silthmer had been given specific orders: eliminate Amy Parker first, as she was the strategic mind that could organize resistance. Then target the security chief, the medical personnel, and key technical specialists. Break their command structure and the colony would surrender without resistance. The evacuation drill began at dawn. Amy stood in the central plaza as colonists moved in organized groups toward designated safety zones. The drill was proceeding smoothly when the emergency alarm started blaring. A real crisis had developed in the eastern mining sector where a support beam had collapsed, trapping several workers. "All available personnel to Sector 7, Danny's voice echoed through the communication system. "We need medical teams and heavy equipment immediately." Amy watched as the evacuation drill transformed into a real rescue operation. Colonists abandoned their assigned safety positions to help with the emergency. Dr. Kevin Mitchell grabbed his medical kit and ran toward the mining sector. Engineer Tony Walsh commandeered a construction vehicle to help clear debris. Even office workers and teachers joined the effort, forming human chains to pass supplies and equipment. What made Silthmer pause was Amy's reaction. As colony administrator, she could have remained in the command center coordinating the rescue from safety. Instead, she ran directly toward the danger, helping to carry injured miners to the medical station and organizing the civilian volunteers who were risking their lives to save their neighbors. The Vorthic assassin found himself in an unprecedented situation. His target was completely exposed and vulnerable, focused entirely on saving others. According to his orders, this was the perfect opportunity to strike. But something deep in Vorthok culture made him hesitate. The Vorthok had their own code of honor, developed over millions of years of evolution as pack hunters. They respected courage in the face of overwhelming odds. They valued those who protected the weak and defended their communities. They had never encountered a species where these traits were so universally displayed. As Amy helped carry a badly injured miner to safety, completely unaware of the invisible death watching her, Silfmer made a decision that would shock the Zephyrian Empire. Instead of striking, he revealed himself. The Vorthok materialized from the shadows directly in Amy's path. She stopped suddenly, nearly dropping her end of the stretcher as she found herself face to face with a figure from nightmares. Silfmer stood nearly 8 feet tall, his form seeming to absorb light around him. Where his face should be was a void that suggested features without revealing them. "Do not be afraid," Silfmer said, his voice a whisper that carried despite the noise of the rescue operation around them. "I am not here to harm you at this moment." Amy felt her heart racing, but she forced herself to remain calm. The injured miner on the stretcher was bleeding badly and needed immediate medical attention. "Are you responsible for the disappearances?" "Yes," Silfmer answered honestly. "I am Vorthok. I was sent to eliminate you and your key personnel, but I find myself ... confused by what I observe here." "Confused how?" Amy asked, even as she gestured for Dr. Mitchell to take the injured miner. She never took her eyes off the creature before her. "You lead this colony, yet you risk yourself for others. Your people abandon safety to rescue their neighbors. This behavior is—" Silfmer paused, searching for words in the human language. "It aligns with codes of honor my people hold sacred. Yet you are not Vorthok. How is this possible?" Dr. Kevin Mitchell had finished stabilizing the injured miner and was approaching carefully. As a xenobiologist, he recognized this as potentially the most important first contact event in human history. "What codes of honor do your people follow?" Silfmer turned his attention to the doctor. "We hunt as one. We protect the pack. We show courage in the face of death. We defend those who cannot defend themselves. These are the ways that define us." Those same values define humans, Amy realized. We call them different names, but they're the same principles. We protect our communities, we help those in need, we face danger to save others. "This should not be," Silfmer said, and for the first time his voice carried emotion. "The species we hunt are weak, selfish creatures who abandon each other when threatened. You are not weak. You do not abandon each other. You are like us, but you are not us." This creates a contradiction in my mission. Danny Rodriguez had arrived with additional security personnel, but Amy held up her hand to keep them back. "What exactly is your mission?" "I was ordered to eliminate you and break your people's spirit before the Zephyrian Empire arrives to claim this world. But I cannot kill one who demonstrates the honor codes of my people. To do so would violate everything the Vorthok represent." The rescue operation continued around them as Amy processed this information. "So what happens now?" Silfmer was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know. In 3,000 years of service to the Empire, no Vorthok has ever faced this situation. We have never encountered a species that mirrors our own values while remaining completely alien to us. Can you return the people you took?" Amy asked. "They are alive but held in stasis aboard my ship. They will be returned unharmed." Silfmer began to fade back into the shadows. "I must report to my superiors, but I cannot complete my original mission. This will have consequences I cannot predict." As the Vorthok assassin disappeared, Amy realized that humanity had just survived its first encounter with an enemy that could have destroyed them completely. But more than that, they had apparently found something in themselves that even their enemies respected. Dr. Mitchell looked at the space where Silfmer had been standing. "I think we just made either a very dangerous enemy or a very powerful friend. Either way," Amy said, "we need to prepare for what comes next." The Vorthok homeworld of Narthol existed in perpetual twilight, its surface covered in crystalline structures that refracted starlight into prismatic patterns across the landscape. deep beneath the surface in chambers carved from living rock. Millions of years ago, the Elder Council convened to hear something unprecedented in their species' history. Silthmer knelt in the center of the circular chamber as 12 ancient vortex surrounded him. These were the oldest of their kind, beings who had overseen contracts for the Zephyrian Empire since the beginning of their alliance. Elder Vashkal, whose form seemed more shadow than substance even by Vortex standards, spoke first. "You stand before us having failed to complete a contract for the first time in 3 millennia. Explain." "The humans are not what we expected," Silthmer began, his voice carrying through the chamber without echo. "They demonstrate the codes that define our people. They protect their weak, they sacrifice for their communities, they show courage when facing overwhelming odds. To kill them would violate our most sacred principles." The chamber fell silent. Elder Meshtar, whose consciousness was so ancient that she remembered the Vorthex's first contact with the Zephyrian Empire, finally spoke. "Describe what you witnessed." Silthmer recounted the events on Kepler 442b in detail. He told of Amy Parker risking herself for injured miners, of colonists abandoning safety to rescue their neighbors, of an entire community working together, despite the presence of an unknown killer in their midst. "They knew I was hunting them," Silthmer explained. "Their people were disappearing, yet they continued to put themselves at risk for others. When their leader could have remained in safety, she ran toward danger to help the injured. This is not the behavior of the weak species we typically hunt." Elder Korthoval had remained silent throughout the recounting, but now he shifted forward. "Did they attempt to bargain with you? Offer tribute or submission to spare their lives?" "No, they showed no fear of death, only concern for each other's well-being. Even when I revealed myself to their leader, she did not flee or plead. She asked if I could return the people I had taken." The implications of this revelation rippled through the council. For millions of years, the Vorthak had been pack hunters who valued courage, loyalty, and self-sacrifice above all else. These traits had made them perfect weapons for the Zephyrian Empire, because they understood strength and respected worthy opponents even as they eliminated them, but the Zephyrians had always sent them against species that crumbled under pressure, civilizations that abandoned their principles when faced with extinction. The humans represented something the Vorthak had never encountered, a species that became more unified and protective when threatened. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Jack Collins was receiving reports that made no sense. General Sam Carter stood before a holographic display showing human colonies throughout the outer systems. "The pattern is consistent across all settlements," Sam explained. "Mysterious disappearances, people vanishing from secure locations, then suddenly, all the missing personnel are returned unharmed with no memory of where they were taken." Intelligence Officer Rachel Green pulled up data from 17 different colonies. In every case, the disappearances stopped after the local population engaged in some kind of rescue or humanitarian operation. It's as if whatever was taking them changed its mind. Admiral Collins studied the reports with growing concern. "Any sign of the aliens that attacked the Centaurians?" "We're not sure, but the method matches what Commander Hayes described. Invisible infiltrators who can bypass any security system." On Luna Station, Engineer Tony Walsh was coordinating refugee operations when the latest group of displaced aliens arrived. The station had become a hub for humanitarian aid as the Zephyrian Empire's expansion forced thousands of beings from their homeworlds. Dr. Beth Adams was working around the clock treating injuries from the various refugee species when she noticed something odd. Several of her patients reported seeing shadowy figures in the medical bay, but security scans showed nothing unusual. "Tony, I think we're being watched," Beth told the chief engineer during a break between surgeries. "By who?" Tony asked, checking his security monitors. "I don't know, but my patients keep mentioning shapes in the corners of their vision. Given what happened at the mining colonies, I think we should be careful." What Beth and Tony didn't realize was that a full team of Vorthak assassins had indeed infiltrated Luna Station. They had been sent with orders to eliminate key human personnel involved in the refugee operations. The Zephyrian Empire saw humanity's willingness to help displaced species as a threat to their expansion plans. The Vorthak team leader, Krethmer, watched as human medical teams worked tirelessly to treat alien refugees. These beings didn't share any genetic connection with humanity, yet the humans were using their own resources and risking exposure to unknown diseases to save them. In the station's main docking bay, Tony Walsh supervised the unloading of supply ships while coordinating with refugee transport vessels. When an accident damaged one of the Centauran ships, Tony immediately organized human volunteers to help with repairs. Even though it meant exposing themselves to potentially hostile alien technology, the Vorthak assassins found themselves witnessing the same pattern that had confounded Silthmer. Humans consistently chose to help others even at personal cost. They worked together instinctively, sharing resources and taking risks for the benefit of complete strangers. Krethmer made contact with his team through their telepathic link. Hold position. Do not engage targets until further analysis. This decision would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances. Vorthak assassins were trained to complete their missions without hesitation. But the human behavior they were observing triggered something deep in their evolutionary programming. Dr. Susan Wright, a xenopsychologist studying on Luna Station, was analyzing behavioral patterns among the various refugee species when she noticed something remarkable. The psychological profiles don't match typical refugee populations, she reported to Admiral Collins during their daily briefing. What do you mean? The Admiral asked. Usually, displaced populations show signs of depression, anxiety, and social breakdown. But the aliens we're helping are actually showing improved psychological health after spending time around human aid workers. It's as if contact with humans is helping them recover from their trauma. This observation was more significant than Susan realized. The Vorthak assassins were monitoring these psychological changes and recognizing something profound. The humans weren't just helping other species survive. They were helping them maintain their dignity and hope in the face of overwhelming adversity. Elder Vashkal had listened to reports from multiple Vorthak teams across human space, and the message was always the same. Humans demonstrated the core values that the Vorthak held sacred, but they extended these values beyond their own species to include any being in need. This presents us with an impossible situation, the elder announced to the council. We cannot kill a species that embodies our own principles more perfectly than many of our own people. Yet we are bound by contract to the Zephyrian Empire. Elder Meshtar's ancient voice carried through the chamber like wind through crystal caves. Perhaps the time has come to reconsider our relationship with the Empire. For 3,000 years we have served as weapons against the weak and corrupt. But what if we have finally found a species worth protecting instead of destroying? The suggestion was revolutionary. The Vorthak had never broken a contract, never refused a mission, never questioned their role as the Empire's invisible death. But they had also never encountered a species like humanity. Silthmer spoke from his position in the center of the council chamber. I request permission to return to human space for further observation. If we are to make this decision, we must fully understand what we are dealing with. Granted, Elder Vashkal replied. But know this, the Zephyrian Empire will not accept our hesitation indefinitely. If we do not complete our contract soon, they will send other weapons against the humans, and they will likely send forces against us as well. As Silthmore departed Narthal to return to human space, he carried with him a message that would change the course of galactic history. The Vorthak, for the first time in their long alliance with the Zephyrian Empire, were beginning to question which side they should be fighting for on Luna Station. Tony Walsh noticed that the mysterious shadowy figures his staff had been reporting were becoming more frequent, but also less threatening. It was almost as if they were being protected by invisible guardians rather than stalked by invisible hunters. He had no way of knowing that he was absolutely right. The communication reached Overlord Crafther as he stood in his private chambers aboard the Void Render, studying tactical displays of the expanding human territories. What he heard from War Leader Threshgall of the Vorthak made his scaled blood Run cold? The contracts cannot be completed as originally specified? Threshgull's voice carried through the quantum communication link with unprecedented uncertainty. The human species demonstrates behavioral patterns that conflict with our operational protocols? Crafter's claws scraped against the metal surface of his command table. Explain this failure immediately. They are not like other species we have eliminated. They possess honor codes that mirror our own. To kill them would violate the fundamental principles that make us effective as your instruments of war. For several moments, the only sound in the chamber was the hum of the ship's engines. In 3,000 years of partnership, the Vorthak had never failed to complete a contract. They had eliminated countless species across hundreds of worlds, always with perfect efficiency and absolute reliability. Are you telling me that the most feared assassins in the galaxy are refusing to complete their mission because they respect their targets? Crathra's voice carried a dangerous edge. We are telling you that killing the humans would be dishonorable by the same codes that have made us valuable to your empire. We cannot and will not proceed. The implications of this development sent shockwaves through the Zephyrian command structure. Admiral Vexler, Crathra's chief military advisor, was summoned immediately to discuss alternatives. Without the Vorthak to eliminate enemy leadership, our conventional forces will face organized resistance, Vexler warned. The humans may be primitive, but if their command structures remain intact, they could prove surprisingly difficult to conquer. Then we will overwhelm them with superior numbers and firepower, Crafter decided. Prepare the Fifth Fleet for immediate deployment to human space. If the Vorthak will not complete their contracts, we will handle this ourselves. What the Zephyrian leadership did not realize was that their conversation was being monitored by human intelligence operations. Captain Steve Baker of the UES Defiance had been conducting reconnaissance missions along the Empire's borders when his ship's advanced sensors detected the quantum communications. Admiral Collins needs to see this immediately, Steve told his communications officer. We're looking at a full-scale invasion force, not just the invisible killers we've been dealing with. On Earth, the Global Defense Council convened an emergency session as Admiral Collins briefed them on the latest intelligence. President Karen Lewis listened grimly as the scope of the threat became clear. How many ships are we talking about? She asked. Conservative estimates suggest over 500 vessels in the Fifth Fleet alone, Admiral Collins replied. They have technology centuries ahead of ours and enough firepower to sterilize every human colony simultaneously? Dr. Susan Wright had been analyzing the psychological profiles of the refugee species on Luna Station when she made a connection that changed everything. Admiral, I think there's something else we need to consider. The behavioral patterns I've been studying suggest that our invisible stalkers aren't trying to kill us anymore. What do you mean? General Carter asked. The reports from our colonies show a pattern. The disappearances have stopped, but our security teams are detecting increased activity around our facilities. It's almost like we're being protected rather than hunted. This theory gained support when engineer Mike Foster on Luna Station made a startling discovery. While conducting routine maintenance on the station's defensive systems, he found that several critical vulnerabilities had been repaired by unknown means. Someone has been upgrading our security systems, Mike reported to Tony Walsh. The work is so advanced that I can barely understand how it functions, but our defenses are now significantly stronger than they were designed to be. Dr. Beth Adams had noticed similar anomalies in the medical bay. Equipment that should have failed weeks ago was functioning perfectly, and several of her most critically injured patients had recovered far faster than medically possible. It's like we have invisible guardian angels, she told Tony during their daily briefing. Someone or something is helping us, and they're very good at staying hidden. The truth was even more remarkable than Beth suspected. Not only had the Vorthak refused to continue hunting humans, they had begun actively protecting human settlements from other Zephyrian threats. Silthmer and his fellow assassins were using their skills to sabotage Empire operations throughout human space. War leader Threshgull stood before the assembled Vorthak clans on Narthal, delivering a speech that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. For 3 millennia, we have served as weapons for the Zephyrian Empire, eliminating species that showed weakness in the face of conquest. But the humans have shown us something we thought impossible, a species that becomes stronger when threatened, more unified when attacked, more courageous when facing extinction. The gathered Vorthok listened in silent attention as their leader continued. They demonstrate every principle we hold sacred, extended not just to their own kind but to all beings in need. They risk themselves for strangers. They share resources with refugees. They face overwhelming odds to protect the innocent. To kill such beings would be the ultimate betrayal of everything we represent. Elder Vashkal stepped forward from the council chamber. The Zephyrian Empire has issued an ultimatum. Complete the human contracts or face termination of our alliance. They consider our refusal to be contamination that must be purged. This revelation stirred anger among the assembled. Vorthok. After 3,000 years of faithful service, the Empire was threatening to destroy them for following their own moral codes. Then perhaps it is time to choose a different alliance, Threshgold declared. If the Empire considers honor to be contamination, then we are no longer aligned with their goals. Meanwhile, Captain Steve Baker was experiencing firsthand what Vorthok protection meant. His ship had been surrounded by Zephyrian destroyers during a reconnaissance mission when the enemy vessels suddenly began experiencing catastrophic system failures. What's happening to them? Steve asked his tactical officer, Julie Murphy. Unknown, sir. Their weapon systems are shutting down, their engines are failing, and their communications are being jammed by their own equipment. Through his viewscreen, Steve watched as dark shapes moved across the hulls of the enemy ships. Within minutes, the entire Zephyrian squadron was drifting helplessly in space, their crews either unconscious or evacuated. A familiar whisper filled the Defiance's bridge as Silthmer materialized near Steve's command chair. Your ship is safe. Captain Baker, the Zephyrian crews have been placed in stasis and will recover unharmed, but their vessels are disabled. Steve looked at the Vorthok assassin with amazement. You're protecting us. We are protecting those who demonstrate the values we respect, Silthmer replied. Your species has shown us that strength comes not from the ability to kill, but from the willingness to preserve life. Why? Steve asked. Why risk your relationship with your empire for us? Because empires built on fear and oppression are not worth serving? We have spent 3,000 years as weapons of conquest, but perhaps it is time to become guardians of those who deserve protection. The conversation was interrupted by urgent communications from Earth. Admiral Collins' voice carried through the ship's speakers with barely controlled excitement. All ships were receiving a priority transmission from an unknown source. It's being broadcast on all frequencies throughout human space. The transmission was from War Leader Threshgold, speaking directly to humanity's leadership. People of Earth and her colonies, I am Threshgold of the Vorthok. For 3 millennia, my people have served as assassins for the Zephyrian Empire. We were sent to eliminate your leaders and break your resistance before invasion. Steve exchanged glances with his crew as the unprecedented message continued. But we have observed your species and found something remarkable. You embody the same principles of honor, courage, and protection that define our own people. We cannot and will not be instruments of your destruction. The transmission paused before delivering the most shocking news of all. The Zephyrian Empire has mobilized their 5th Fleet to attack your worlds directly. They consider both humans and Vorthok to be threats that must be eliminated. We offer you our alliance in the coming battle, not as servants of an empire, but as partners in resistance against tyranny. As the transmission ended, Steve realized that the galaxy's most feared assassins had just declared war on their own empire to protect humanity. The question now was whether this unexpected alliance would be enough to survive what was coming. Through the viewscreen, Steve could see Zephyrian reinforcements already approaching. The real war was about to begin. President Karen Lewis stood before the emergency session of the Global Defense Council, knowing that her next decision would determine humanity's survival. The holographic display showed Zephyrian battle fleets massing at the edge of human space, while intelligence reports confirmed that the Empire had begun hunting down Vorthak settlements throughout the galaxy. "They're offering us military alliance," Admiral Collins reported, reviewing the data streams coming from Vorthak sources. "Complete tactical information about Zephyrian fleet movements, weaknesses in their technology, and coordination for joint operations." General Carter pulled up casualty projections on his tactical display. "Without their help, our survival chances are less than 3%. With Vorthak support, we might actually have a fighting chance." The debate that followed split the council down the middle. Secretary of Defense Paul Garcia argued strongly for accepting the alliance. "These beings could have wiped out every human settlement in the galaxy, but instead they're offering to fight alongside us. That has to mean something." Secretary of State Rachel Green voiced the opposition's concerns. "We're talking about allying ourselves with the most feared killers in known space. What happens after we defeat the Zephyrians? Will we be trading one threat for another?" President Lewis listened to both sides before making her decision. "The Vorthak had every opportunity to eliminate us and chose not to. They're risking extinction to protect us from their former masters. If that isn't proof of their good faith, nothing ever will be." The formal alliance was negotiated through Sulfmer, who had become the unofficial ambassador between the two species. The negotiations took place aboard the UES Constitution, humanity's flagship, in a meeting that would have been impossible to imagine just weeks earlier. Commander Paul Garcia led the human delegation, while Sulfmer spoke for the Vorthak. The terms were surprisingly straightforward: complete intelligence sharing, coordinated military operations, and mutual defense against Zephyrian forces. "Our people have different fighting styles," Sulfmer explained, his shadowy form somehow conveying respectful attention despite his alien appearance. "Humans excel at large-scale coordination and technological innovation. Vorthak specialize in infiltration and precision strikes. Together, we can exploit weaknesses that neither species could address alone." The first test of this alliance came sooner than anyone expected. Reconnaissance pilot Julie Murphy was conducting a patrol mission near the agricultural world of New Kansas when her sensors detected an incoming Zephyrian assault fleet. "Command, this is Murphy. I'm tracking 47 enemy vessels approaching New Kansas. They'll be in weapons range within 6 hours." The colony on New Kansas housed nearly 50,000 civilians, mostly families involved in food production for the Outer Rim settlements. Colonel Gary Thompson commanded the Planetary Defense Forces, but his garrison was equipped for peacekeeping operations, not repelling a full-scale invasion. "We can't evacuate 50,000 people in 6 hours, Gary reported to Admiral Collins. "We're going to have to make a stand here." The response came from an unexpected source. War Leader Threshkull's voice cut through the communication channels with urgent intensity. "Colonel Thompson, this is Threshkull of the Vorthak. We have 43 of our shadow warriors in position around your world. If you can hold the orbital approaches, we can eliminate their ground command structure." What followed was the first true test of human-Vorthak cooperation in battle. Gary's forces concentrated their limited firepower on the incoming troop transports. While Vorthak infiltrators began materializing aboard, Zephyrian command ships. The battle was unlike anything in recorded military history. Human pilots flew desperate holding actions against superior enemy fighters while invisible. Vorthak warriors systematically disabled enemy vessels from within. Captain Lisa Hayes, commanding the defense squadron, watched in amazement as Zephyrian ships began experiencing catastrophic failures just as they achieved firing position. "Their command and control systems are going dark across the entire fleet," her tactical officer reported. "Whatever the Vorthak are doing, it's working." On the ground, Gary Thompson coordinated the defense of the colony's population centers. While Vorthak warriors eliminated Zephyrian officers as fast as they could be identified, the enemy ground forces found themselves leaderless and confused, unable to coordinate their superior numbers and equipment effectively. Dr. Kevin Mitchell, who had been studying Vorthok capabilities since the first contact on Kepler 442b, provided crucial intelligence during the battle. The Vorthok can identify command personnel by their biological signatures and tactical behavior patterns. He explained to Gary's staff, "They're not just killing randomly. They're surgically removing the enemy's ability to function as an organized force." The battle for New Kansas lasted 18 hours and ended with a decisive victory for the Human Vorthok Alliance. The Zephyrian invasion force was completely destroyed, with most of their personnel captured rather than killed. It was a statement that would resonate throughout the galaxy. Engineer Mike Foster arrived with the post-battle analysis team and made a discovery that impressed even the Vorthok. "The humans didn't just defend their own people," he reported to Threshko. "When Zephyrian troop transports started crashing, human medical teams immediately began treating enemy wounded alongside their own casualties." This observation confirmed what the Vorthok had suspected about human nature. Even in the midst of a life-or-death battle, humans maintained their principles about protecting life and treating enemies with dignity. The victory at New Kansas had strategic implications far beyond the immediate tactical success. Word spread throughout the galaxy that the Zephyrian Empire's most feared weapons had not only abandoned them but were actively fighting against them alongside a previously unknown species. Amy Parker, now serving as liaison coordinator for Human Vorthok Joint Operations, received reports from refugee populations throughout the Outer Rim territories. Species that have been hiding from the Empire for decades are starting to make contact. They want to know if the rumors are true, if there's really an alliance that can stand against Zephyrian expansion. President Lewis convened another emergency session of the Global Defense Council to address this development. "We're not just fighting for human survival anymore. We've become a symbol of resistance for oppressed species throughout the galaxy." The weight of this responsibility was enormous. Secretary Garcia pulled up intelligence estimates showing that over 200 species were currently under Zephyrian occupation or threat. If we succeed in this war, we could be looking at the liberation of half the galaxy. If we fail, we doom everyone who has placed their hopes in our alliance. War leader Threshko provided the Vorthok perspective during a joint command briefing. The Empire's response to New Kansas will be overwhelming force. They cannot allow word to spread that their expansion can be stopped. Overlord Crafter will commit everything necessary to destroy both our species. Intelligence reports confirmed this assessment. Admiral Collins showed the assembled commanders tracking data from deep space monitors. "We're detecting massive fleet movements throughout Zephyrian space. They're pulling forces from occupation duties and border patrols. This looks like preparation for a total war." Dr. Susan Wright, who had been studying the psychological effects of the alliance on both species, offered a different perspective. "The Zephyrians have built their empire on fear and the assumption that resistance is futile. Our victory at New Kansas doesn't just threaten their military expansion, it challenges the fundamental mythology that keeps their empire together." As the meeting concluded, Silthmer approached President Lewis with a request that demonstrated how much the relationship between the species had evolved. "Madame President, my people would like to propose something unprecedented. We wish to establish joint colonies where humans and Vorthok can live and work together. Not just military cooperation, but true integration of our societies." The proposal was remarkable considering that just months earlier, the Vorthok had been sent to exterminate humanity. Now they were asking to build a shared future together. "We've learned from humans that strength comes not from isolation or dominance, but from cooperation and mutual support," Silthmer explained. "If we survive this war, we want to create something better than either of our species could achieve alone." President Lewis looked out at the stars visible through the viewport of the Constitution and realized that humanity was no longer fighting just for survival. They were fighting for the chance to help reshape an entire galaxy based on principles of cooperation rather than conquest. The question was whether they would live long enough to make that vision a reality.